Hello, good evening. So I am Crystal Parikh. I'm the director of the Asian Pacific American Institute at NYU, and it's my privilege to introduce tonight's program. Tonight's live installment of Time to Say Goodbye and the celebration of the memoir, Stay True, is part of our year-long focus on the theme of recovery and repair. In the face of a global pandemic, newly visible violence against Asian Pacific Americans, and myriad economic and environmental uncertainties, we at the APA Institute have been moved to seek collective modes of recovery and repair. As we mourn those who have been lost, we look to traditional and new modes of healing that Asian Pacific Americans have fostered. We hope to look to the past, striving to recover the knowledge and resources it might offer us for addressing the many contemporary challenges facing Asian Pacific Americans today, and for understanding better what might constitute resilience and flourishing for our communities. Our writer-in-residence this year, Tammy Kim, and also the curator of tonight's event, has made an impressive and lasting impact with her work as a journalist, podcaster, and lawyer. She shares with those of us at the Asian Pacific American Institute a deep and abiding interest in the diverse lives of Asian and Pacific Americans, as well as the histories and social conditions that shape our communities. We feel very fortunate to have Tammy guide us with her professional knowledge and personal reflections on matters such as immigration, militarism, popular culture, and labor organizing. And we're especially so excited to be hosting tonight's live recording of Tammy and Jay Caspian Kang's wildly successful podcast, and to be celebrating Hua Hsu's new memoir, Stay True. And Time to Say Goodbye is a podcast and a newsletter about left politics, culture, pandemic life, Asia, and Asian America. Vulture named it one of its top 10 podcasts of 2021. After the recording, there will be a book signing and reception. Books are available for purchase via the NYU bookstore table in the back there. And the book signing line will start at the base of the stairs and go along the wall of the auditorium. And finally, we'd like to offer a special thanks to tonight's ASL interpreters from All Hands in Motion, and to our alum and student staff, particularly Aliyah Luthra, who designed all the graphics. And I'm also especially grateful to Mita Magnani and Laura Chen-Schultz, without whom none of our programming would be possible. And now let me briefly introduce Tammy, Jay, and Hua. You can find fuller versions of their bios in your programs. So Tammy Kim, as I just mentioned, is a contributing writer at The New Yorker and a co-host of Time to Say Goodbye. She is, of course, the 2022-23 writer-in-residence at the APA Institute at NYU. Jay Caspian Kang is a staff writer for The New Yorker, the author of The Loneliest Americans, which is available for purchase tonight from the NYU bookstore, and is the co-host of Time to Say Goodbye. And Hua Hsu is a staff writer at The New Yorker, a professor of literature at Bard College, and the author of Stay True, a memoir, which is also available for purchase this evening. So let me welcome Tammy, Jay, and Hua to the stage, and I will turn it over to them. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. This is crazy. We didn't know what the turnout was going to be like and tried to be reasonable, but this is very exciting. So thank you all for coming. And this is our first live show.
Yeah.
And
amazing. Thank you, guys. Yeah.
Tammy, do you want to go down your list of thank yous
Sure,
here?
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for being here, and we're really excited to have this be part of my residency this year. In my residency, I'm looking at a lot of transnational Asian issues, and it fits really well with Hua's book, which, if you've read, explores the relationship between Taiwan and the United States. We just wanted to say some thank yous to folks here, Amita Magnani, Crystal Parikh, Laura Chen-Schultz, and the audiovisual team. And thanks to our extraordinary producer, May Schatz. Where are you, May? Thank you. If you guys have been listening to the pod recently, it sounds a lot better and more professional, and it's because May's on board. So thank you to May. And also shout out to our former co-host, Andy Liu, who's in Philly and couldn't be here tonight. So thank you. Remember him, Jay?
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I thought Andy would be here tonight.
The second baby, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. Okay, well, yeah, we're very excited to have tonight's guest, which is Hua. Hua is one of the first people in journalism, and you weren't even a journalist back then, right? But like many, many years ago, I think this was like 2009 or something like that, right? Hua had a blog at The Atlantic, and it was something that I read, and we knew some people in common, like some friend of mine who was a blogger, right, Nathaniel, and yeah, he's really been sort of a gentle hand guiding me through the waters of
The media world.
of my career. Yeah, Hua introduced me to the film Chan is Missing. He like suggests things that I should read and watch. When I get mad about something, and I'll complain, and he'll be like, "Look, you should really read this and think about it." And it has a calming effect. And so I think that reading this book too, it just seems like I don't know. I think there is like sort of this idea of how things that people like together can bring people together, but also sort of form relationships, and maybe they mean something more than the work of art itself or the music itself or whatever. And so yeah, I've had I look up to Hua quite a bit, so I'm very excited to have him here.
Yeah.
So thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for being here, Hua, and congrats on your book.
Thanks. I feel very, very weird right now, but I'm very thankful to be here.
I know, you gave me the weirdest look when I started talking. I felt bad. I was like, maybe I was talking about...
We've been hanging out for 3 hours.
I know, but I really...
in private.
I thought that it was like... I did have this thought. I was like, wait, maybe it was somebody else who had an Atlantic blog in my head. And I was like, am I misremembering this whole thing? But no, that was all true. Yeah, we watched the Mexico, or no, we watched the Japan game. It was very exciting.
Yeah.
But I felt very conflicted about it. Yeah.
Any World Cup fans here?
Yeah, people have been watching.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I guess, right, the first thing we should do is that, we have a lot of people here from wide and far, right? And we'd like to welcome all of you. There are people from Chicago, D.C., Rochester, California, Toronto.
Thank you so much.
Wow,
it's incredible. Yeah, we just ran into a friend from our Discord in California, so that was awesome.
Yeah.
All for you, Hua.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that we're going to just sort of launch right into a conversation about this book. It was just named one of the Times' 10 best books of the year, so congratulations about that. Was that like a weird moment when you found out about that?
You mean like personally?
That's a terrible question. Just forget it. I don't know. If someone asked me that, I would just be like, "Why are you asking me that?" It's just like, it's terrible.
I didn't know
let's
that
go
there
on.
was.
I have a whole list of questions here, so I'm gonna get through them. That one, let's forget that one. All right. So then, the next.
Well, should we say a little bit about the book in case folks haven't read it? Well, do you want to just give an overview, or Jay, you could say what your impressions of it were?
Okay. Yeah. Why do you want to talk about your book?
What?
You want me to summarize my book?
No.
Is that a weird? Okay, these are like bad author questions.
No, it's fine. It's about. No, it's. It's a book
memoir.
About, how many are most people here from NYU or? No. Okay.
Oh, thank you for a few people.
Not like a heavy Bobcat representation here. Yeah, it's just a book about a period of my life, college, when. I don't know, I feel like I was writing it from this very kind of intimate, solipsistic, navel-gazing place, because I was just trying to figure some stuff out myself, and meaningful friendships that I made when I was in college, and themes of loss and grief. And I thought that it was so specific to people who went to Berkeley between the years of 1995 and 1998, who lived in Ida Sproul Hall, that I didn't actually imagine that anyone would actually relate to it at all.
Well, do you remember, we met, when I had moved to Berkeley, do you remember we met at, that coffee shop near campus, and you told me the book you were writing? You were like, oh, I'm going to write this book. And in my head, I did think, I was so surprised, because, when you're like, I'm going to write a book, I thought it would be about music or something like that, and you're like, no, it's going to be about this period of my life, and I was like, wow, that was, kind of unexpected. I don't know. Did it feel that way to you? You weren't this is not a book that you thought you would write, or is it the book that you always thought you were gonna write?
Yeah.
It's something that I always thought I would write. I mean, I guess just to be more clear about it, like it's about like this friendship I made when I was in college, and then when between our junior and senior years, my friend was killed, and then it was about sort of like the aftermath and trying to figure out what it means to be friends with people who I'm sure it's not a foreign concept to a lot of you, that this idea of like, you know, your tastes are your personality, or you know, what I like and what you like are sort of what distinguish you from me. And so I think I was just thinking about a lot of these things, and immediately after the event, like I started writing. So I always knew I was going to write stuff, but I mean, and this is probably like the deeply Asian American part of it. Like I didn't think I would become a writer because there were just no models for that when I was in high school or college. And so I thought I would just write this because I needed to process some stuff. I didn't necessarily think it would be as a writer. I thought I'd be like a researcher or something, or a lawyer.
Yeah, that idea of like writing to process things is interesting, like because I personally like, don't get it, you know, because there's like I write about myself a lot, but then there's like stuff that I like don't write about ever because I don't want to think about it. But then I guess I am processing things, but like, you know, it's interesting that it just happened to you at such a young age, you know, to me, that this was the way that you decided that you wanted to cope with this tragedy that had happened. Did it just
You mean
like
writing as opposed to like painting or something?
yeah, or like, you know, like I don't know, like eating or like, you know, like or like various modes of like self-destruction or whatever, right? That
Yeah,
it
that was
wouldn't
part of
come.
it, too.
It doesn't seem like it would be so natural as a way of coping with it. Like,
Yeah, and if you started it then, how much has it evolved over these 20 years? And, you know, was there a time in the last couple of years where you thought, all right, I kind of know now the form it's going to take?
Yeah, it's changed a lot. I mean,
I
so
assume, yeah.
I started writing a lot of the stuff that's in the book like the day after, in 1998.
Oh.
But and I think for years, like even as I was working as a journalist, like I was very
What is
much.
that in quotes?
I don't know, because like I think that this is just sort of I don't know, maybe this is just being a Californian, but I didn't know. I just think that I've never really self-identified as journalist or as part of the media, even though I clearly am part of these things.
Yeah.
But I always just thought like, well, I like to write.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I write, and so I think the idea of the category is just something that I was always just a little confused by, because what I was actually interested in doing was this other thing that had nothing to do with my journalism. So I think that's one of the reasons why I write about so many different things,
Right.
is because I actually don't care that deeply about any one thing. Like I'm just curious about all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I feel like when I was in my 20s writing in my journal, it was just sort of relentlessly sad.
Yeah.
And it took a while to kind of come around and figure out different ways of thinking about what it means to lose someone and what it means to try and do something on their behalf, or that sounds maybe not on their behalf, but in their image, or just sort of like to extend these things. So
Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah, like a large part of the book at the beginning, I think, is about like people trying to figure out who they are, right? And specifically, it's about yourself and your father trying to figure out at the same time. There's this like beautiful line about how like I think we have it right here, which is that like you know, immigrants are, you know, basically the idea is like you and your parents are trying to figure it out together, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you think that like one figures it out and it's somewhat linear, but you're both trying to figure yourself out together, and a lot of it is trying to figure out how do you relate to like a culture that is essentially foreign to you. And I think about this with my parents all the time. I remember there was like a period of my life where my sister and I were very into The Simpsons, and my father would watch it with us, and it would be like radio silence, you know? And it's not that he doesn't have a sense of humor, but then at some point he tells us, he's like, well, I just don't understand any of the references that are going
Right,
on in
yeah.
this, you know? And like, you know, it was a sad thing to hear, because it's like, well, I get it, but you don't. And it's not like a language barrier thing. It's just because you've lived in America much longer than I have, but like, and as an adult, but like you haven't internalized as much of the culture. And so like,
were there things that he found really funny that
I mean, I
You
love
did-
The Simpsons. I thought it was very
But
funny.
like, what did he find?
Your dad, though.
Yeah.
Oh
What
no!
did he-
Well, I like like
It was
I
just
don't-
silent.
Like Homer walking into a wall was funny,
Yeah.
like like stuff like that was like funny, but like sort of the more layered stuff that made the early Simpsons like sort of intellectually interesting to young people was like lost, and I don't know like when did you like your father's journey for this was really interesting to me because it seems like he went deeper, right, than a lot of immigrant parents would, right? Like my dad does not. Like he listens to Peter, Paul, and Mary and stuff like that, but that's because he listened to it in Korea,
Yeah,
But like once he got here, it's just like sometimes plays golf, and that's about that's about it. And it's not because of a lack of curiosity, but I just think that that's like kind of more standard. But yeah, like what? Just talk about that a bit, like how your father sort of was trying to find himself through American pop culture. He's like buying Guns N' Roses,
I know, I was amazed by
records,
that.
and like listening to bands and stuff like that. And that seems like somewhat exceptional to me, and it, for me at least, it was a very moving part of the book.
But were there ways in which your parents like were into American culture, like other than Peter, Paul, and Mary?
No.
Not
How about you,
really.
Tammy? Yeah.
I don't think there were access points.
Were your parents also
really.
into Peter, Paul, and Mary?
My dad was really into Neil Diamond, which
My
like
parents,
that era.
Yeah,
like,
my dad.
I-
My parents too.
I feel like I have
James
a bunch
Taylor.
of like, yeah, like I
Yeah.
have like a few like dad albums from
Right,
him, but
yeah.
no, but like what you describe, and also your dad is so sensitive. He's like the Asian dad I wanted, but like
It's funny because like all writing, like you're narrativizing stuff that was just like
Sure, yeah.
experience, and so he's I like my dad, but he's definitely like we were arguing recently, and he was just like, now you're gonna write another book about how we actually don't agree on everything, and so I think that there's definitely like a lot of projection there because I don't think he thinks he's sensitive. I don't think he feels like he's sensitive either.
Right.
But I also don't think that he, like many like first generation immigrants, like I don't think he was thinking about like I'm trying to fit in or I'm trying to understand something. I think he just was subjected to so much music in his boarding house in Amherst, and he was like, I kind of like this, and he got into it. But a lot of me watching them listen to music, and I think that's a pretty important thing, is just kind of watching people around you read or laugh or listen to music. It's sort of how we learn to do that too. I think that he wasn't really thinking about it as a new context. He was just sort of like, oh, this guy's really good at singing. Like he has a surprisingly high-pitched voice, This other man with the top hat is like incredibly good at the guitar. But it's not like he was looking at it thinking like this is a symbol of freedom and excess.
Right, right.
Whereas like that's what I was internalizing because I was a teenager. And I don't know, like there is something kind of cool about misreading our parents or people around us in that way. But yeah, like I guess I didn't find it that weird because there were other kids at my high school whose parents were into Metallica or just who were just like engineers, and so maybe it was just very specific to people who grew up in the Bay Area in the early '90s. But I think there was just this weird like abundance of I don't know. Maybe it was just kind of this weird moment where cable TV was like pretty cheap, so people were able to be into things that you wouldn't expect that they'd be into.
Yeah. I was thinking about your book in relation to Jay's book when I was reading the sections of your book that are transcribed faxes. So if you guys have read it, and of course I hope you will, Hua reproduces faxes that his dad sent when he was working in Taiwan. And they're incredibly touching and sometimes weird, and they're just really sort of all over the place. But it reveals like a real tenderness between you guys. And Jay has a section in his book too where he has a translation of something that his mom has written. So I was curious from both of you guys, like why include that stuff? How did you feel kind of processing their own words?
I included it just because I felt like it was a better expression of how she felt than I could do, just because you're a kid and you're not that concerned about how they're feeling at the time, and you don't really know. and then you think about it later when you're an adult, but you're generally processing it through yourself, you know. And so like at some point you're just talking about yourself. And, you know, reading that was pretty, you know, it was interesting to me just because it took me so long to read it because like you know, like I can't read Korean quickly anymore, or like, and then I had somebody start to translate it because I was like, well, you should just translate large parts of it, and like if I do it, it's gonna take like however long. And it was, yeah, it was like, it was affecting to see that there was like some, like that it wasn't just like, okay, we have to like survive here. Which is something that you write about, you know, at the beginning of this book too, which is like the first generation survives, right? And then, but yeah, like these sort of pauses. But we don't really think about our parents that way, especially I think as second generation immigrant kids, where you're just kind of like very ungrateful about it. You know, you're just kind of like half of you is just like, why am I here? You're like, why did you move here? And then the other half of you is like, why make sure that my life is like that other kid's life, you know? And so, I don't know, that's why I did it, at least, yeah. Well, what about you?
Yeah, similar. I mean, I think, I don't know if it's just about being the child of immigrants. I think all kids don't actually care about their parents. You know, like, I think that's just part of being a kid is you're concerned about your own emotions, but you don't really understand your parents' context, nor should you, because you're so much younger than them. But I remember finding the faxes because I come from a line of pack rats.
I was gonna say,
And,
the archive
like it was
at your
in a
house.
sheaf alongside a sheaf of like Pacific Bell phone bills from 1984. And I was like, that's sick. We have like a year of phone bills from 1984. Like this is the research possibilities are endless here. But I found the faxes, and I remember writing them because it was such a part of my teenage years was just that my dad was in Taiwan all the time. And again, it wasn't that weird because like quite a few people from my high school shared that.
I see.
But when I found the faxes, I realized that, like at first I was just like, oh, it's hilarious that I was trying to engage my dad in a conversation about Soundgarden. But then I looked below and I was like, oh, he was really there. Now there's this paragraph about like growing up and being like a young man. And I like went downstairs. I'm like, Dad, you know, thanks for trying so hard to like parent and like be there for me. And he just sort of laughed and was like, what are you talking about? He's like, why do we still have this? And he didn't necessarily, and again, I think it is one of those things where he wasn't like processing anything. He wasn't necessarily conscious of how this would be read. He was just trying to give advice, you know, trying to be present.
Be present, right.
And so obviously like in the book, there's like projection there where I'm like thinking about, I'm probably ascribing like a much more holistic kind of intention than there was. Because he was just trying to, in a way he was just grasping for straws. He's like, I'm in Taiwan, like this is the one shot I have to communicate with you, so I'm just gonna try and like filibuster, try and like ask questions to get you to respond to me. And so like I just liked having his voice, but I also just like how in the book I quote like Aristotle, Derrida, Marcel Mauss, but then I also quote my father, my mother, and my friend Ken, and just that idea of like citation and just having their voices be almost as sage as you know Derrida or like Aristotle or you know Charles Taylor. Like I liked having a lot of them in the book because it felt like they were there too. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's really sweet.
Yeah, I actually wanted to read that passage, you know, because I want to talk a lot here about like record collecting, because it's something that has always been curious about you to me personally, you know, because I'm not a record guy, and like but a lot of people.
Do you collect anything?
No.
Shoes.
No. Do you? I had some sneakers, but that it was mostly out of peer pressure.
But was it more out of like speculation?
No, it's because I was like at the time I was working at an ad agency. I was being paid a lot of money, and I was like, I should spend some of this money, and so I spent it on sneakers. But then every time they came in, I felt this like disappointment in myself. Because I'd be like, what am I going to do with this box? You know? And then I would
got to keep the box.
I would get really mad about it. And then, Yeah, I think on the Discord or something like that, I'm just gonna give them all away at this point because like
Wow.
it's like if anyone is a size 9, it's a sample size, you know, and you would like any number of Jordans, please tell me. But no, I've never collected anything really.
Do you collect
I
anything?
haven't really either. I mean, I've seen your record collection, Hua, and I think mine is like 1/100th of that.
But are there other things that you like having around?
Oh, really? Yeah.
No,
We're not like
no.
you.
We don't.
Wait, so is that normal or am I normal? I don't know.
Yeah. I
Well, you
don't-
obviously
'cause
get
I
it from
feel
your
like I
parents
collect-
with the
yeah.
bills and all.
It's true, yeah.
Like
Still
my
have the bills.
wife and I like are both like don't put things on walls type of
Yeah, that's
people.
kind of.
Not out of like any type of like clean aesthetic, but out of like pure laziness. And it's our house would look really weird if we didn't like once every 4 months like look around and be like, people are gonna think we're like crazy if they step in this house, you know. But like, yeah, so it is a bit. And I don't think that you're the weird one here, but like, let me read this passage. Is that okay? Like it's not gonna embarrass you. There comes a moment for the immigrant's child when you realize that you and your parents are assimilating at the same time. Later, I understood that we were both sifting store to store for some possible future, that we were both mystified by the same fashions, trends, and bits of language, that my late night trips to the record store with my dad had been about discovery, not mastery. Later still, I came to recognize that assimilation as a whole was a race toward a horizon that wasn't fixed. The ideal was ever shifting, and your accent would never be quite perfect. It's beautiful writing. But, like, you know, I wanted to, yeah, like, didn't you just, like, this record collecting thing, right? Like, you know, like, how does it start, right? You know, in the book you talk about quite a bit. I think it's something that has really sort of come to define, at least for me, like, who you are,
Yeah.
you know? Because like, Hua is not, like, Hua also has friends, one of them who lives in Berkeley, and, like, he has so many records too, you know, and every time I go to lunch with him, I feel this disappointment because I know like what he would rather do is talk to me about records. You know? Instead, we talk about our kids, you know, be like, oh yeah, how's your kid doing at school? It's amazing, you know, and he really just wants to talk about some record that he wants to order. He's like, does not like, and I feel that, you know, so yeah, just like how does this become like such a
Wait, so you
central
guys
part of
don't
life?
collect? You wouldn't
You're
say
still
you,
on this? Really?
you have a library, right, of books?
Yeah, but is that
Yeah, that's
collecting? I don't
mostly
know.
like out of like vanity, you know.
Just like loneliest Americans.
Try to seem like an. Yeah.
I have like a whole show. Yeah, like there's a somebody we both know, like, because I had like a photo taken once for some profile, and like behind me there's like he emailed me. It's like that's a very uncracked copy of Proust behind you, and I was like, yep. I was like, yeah. Like, I did read that book. I just didn't read that copy. I just bought that copy because the cover was pretty, you know. But like, yeah, like what is? You don't have to like make this about us, you know. Like where, like when does this start, and why is it such like a important part of your life?
I don't know. I don't know that it is as important to me as it once was.
Right.
Like I would rather talk to you about, you know, your kid than records. But maybe it is just because like my parents had like a pretty big music collection, and I don't know. It just seemed like it was like a hobby that my dad really enjoyed. Like he would go to the record store and I
You
would
did it
have to-
together.
Yeah, and I would think it was the like possibly the least cool thing to do, because when you're a kid, or when I was a kid, I thought everything my parents were into was like
Not cool.
not what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So I was like, it's much cooler to sit here and listen to the Giants sports talk like on an AM radio. And so I think it probably has to do with that, but it probably just is also a version of how, you know, you go to someone's house and they have like this impressive library and you think that they're cultured just because they own a ton of books.
Yeah, that's like why Jay has his.
Yeah.
I know.
But yeah, I haven't really thought about, I mean, I also just like having, show of hands, like how many people here like collect a thing? I would say that's
Okay,
like
yeah.
90% of the people here, right?
That's not.
That was
true.
not 90.
That was like
It was probably like 99%
That
of the people here. So
it was like a strong
That was
40.
a 30%.
Yeah.
I think I also just rationalize it by, you know, like it just there is sort of the prescribed histories that we're taught. There's like history departments and whatnot, but there's also just sort of the casual, scattered, ephemeral history of like a record collection or of like Like there's like I go to flea markets all the time. I've now trained my child to go with me to secondhand shops.
Poor Zeke.
And there's this there's this one flea market I go to, and there's a person who basically just deals in like estate sales, like junk. Like there's nothing good, but he's clearly inherited the belongings of like a Chinese family. He's not Chinese. And so like every week there will be like one week there was just like a box of ointments and like tinctures and soaps from like the 70s. The next week there was like this giant collection of Chinese cookbooks. And then finally there was this collection of photo albums, because I also collect photos of just like random photos of like Asian people that I find on eBay.
What era? Like in America? Or?
Just like weird family suburban photo. Like people will sell like Ziploc bag of 100 pictures of Asian people.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah,
So
wait.
creepy.
When we were putting together documentary,
They're tasteful. They're not like weird pictures, I have to say. So
I had like all the people who were immigrants in the film send us photos of their childhood family photos. And it was very emotionally affecting to see them, because it was, and so we put them all in the film, and so we have like your friend Oliver and his brother when they're babies, and Nancy Wang Yuan, like as a child playing tennis and stuff like that. No, I can see that. Like that stuff is like,
But it's weird.
Yeah,
it
is
was
weird.
But
Stuff like
this
that.
is like a bag of strangers' photos.
No, it is a bag of
no,
strangers.
but I do.
So-
I get it, because I think it's like kind of like,
It's very sweet. Yeah.
there's this like idea in my head that I had, which I don't think it'll work, but like, in my head I was doing it because I was like, well, if I can like populate this film with like these images of these people in these suburban or even urban places, then that in itself is like a sort of, visual reminder to the viewer that like that's what you're doing, right?
Yeah,
Like,
we should
absolutely.
say that this is for Jay's documentary on Michael
Yeah.
Chang,
Oh,
the
yeah.
tennis player, if you guys
Yeah.
don't know, which is coming soon.
Yeah, his mom also put an ad in the newspaper for Chinese cooking lessons.
Oh, yeah,
your
just like
mom.
mine.
Yeah.
That's sweet.
But yeah, no, I just collect. I mean, I just think that there's a lot of ways in which that stuff doesn't conform to a history that's been told.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know, I just like exploring these kinds of informal archives.
Totally.
And it actually does have like a personal origin too, because when my parents got married, this is in the book, but when my parents got married, they took all these photos and they went on this road trip, and then all of their photos were taken out of their car when they parked it next to Columbia, like at some point in the early 70s. And so I'm always like, man, it would be nuts if I somehow stumbled upon all these photos.
Oh my God.
Like it's impossible. There's no way a thief was like, I'm going to develop all these photos, and then hold on to them for 45 years, and then lose them in some sort of storage wars type situation. But there is a kind of weird fantasy that
recovery.
and I think that a lot of the photos that like my collection has, it's like people fishing or people playing sports. Like they're just sort of these very kind of generically Americana images that I find interesting because you just don't see them that often,
Yeah.
You should do like a
Why
museum
am I talking about all
thing.
this? Oh yeah, because I collect records too. So.
The collecting.
Yeah.
I shudder at the thought of my family photos somehow being released into the wild like that. I've
I
always
would
thought
too,
I would like
you know.
burn them before I die or something. I don't know. It seems so personal and private
Yeah. It is.
for
No, it
future
is.
Hua Hsu to
No, it
look
is.
through all
It
this.
is. Yeah. I don't know what to say
maybe-
about that. There's no ethics on eBay.
Well,
so
maybe we should.
unfortunately.
I was curious if you wanted to like talk a little. So Hua talks about his relationship to his dad, and then of course, the book is about this friend, Ken. I mean, to me, the book is really also about like it's about friendship, but it's about masculine friendships and like the development of masculinity and ideas of Asian masculinity. Yeah, do you want to say a little bit about that? I mean, Jay's obviously written a lot about it. There's a sort of like, I don't know, canon's the right word, but there's like a kind of literature on Asian American masculinity now that maybe didn't exist in the same way when you were with these friends
like
at
what?
Cal. I mean,
No, I mean, I don't.
Oh, just generally?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think like Jay, we could think about like Jay's work or Wesley Yang, or we could talk about
right.
the conversations we've been having on the pod and elsewhere around like Asian men's rights activists, all this kind of stuff. So, but this sort of idea about like the insecurity of Asian American men, or the identity of Asian American men.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. All of this, the book is set from like 1995 to 1998, and going to college and taking Asian American Studies classes, there's all these. I feel like most people I know who went to Berkeley took Asian American Studies 20A, which is this intro class, partly because it's like fascinating, but it was also just sort of like a class that people would go to socially. Like it was also my friends all called it Scam because it was like this class where you would learn all this stuff, but it was also just like a fun way to meet people. I took it for purely intellectual reasons after, like when I was a junior, because like at first I was like, why would I want to take a class? That sounds really dumb. But then I think once I started taking these classes and just sort of understanding these like contexts, my friend Ken was very confident in a way that I wasn't. And I don't know, we would talk about a lot of these things. It's funny because it's possible that the stuff we were talking about would sort of fall into this bucket of like Asian American masculinity, but we sort of lacked the understanding to link it to those larger contexts. You know what I mean? And I guess that's where politics starts often. It's just sort of this sense of grievance, like, oh, why is this person on TV and this person's not on TV? Like, there was this formative moment in for him and for when the Real World, a casting agent came to his frat house, and he was like, why hasn't there ever been an Asian American man? And the person was just very dismissive, like, like you guys don't have the personalities for this. And I suppose like if that happened now, there would be like a set of responses that you would know that you could have. But at the time, I mean, maybe it was just that we didn't know, and because people were writing about it and researching these things, but it was just sort of this feeling that we were trying to conjure and trying to like shape into a politics, And so it's definitely something that runs through the book and runs through the friendship that we had. But yeah, I don't know what it would have been like if we had lived in a different period of time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel the same way. There's like not the language about it, even though people had talked about it before. But I don't know. I mean, I've met people like where it's like an Asian dude, super confident and like kind of walks around the world. I think in college I met a couple, like my friend Pat, who's from, he's from the South Bay too, and he went to the same high school that Sam Bankman-Fried went to. And he's like, he was like good at tennis, and then
was that Crystal Springs?
Yeah, and I was like, I've just never met an Asian person like you. And so my response was to always just make fun of him. Like I had a zine in college, and in it I said the whitest man at Bowdoin College is Patrick Soonge, and so that was my way of dealing with it. It was like I'm not proud of it, but it was kind of funny. I still make fun of him that way, but like so I don't think that there was like I don't know. I guess I just didn't experience it that way.
Yeah.
It was just like kind of like where did you come from? Like was more of it. But I don't know. Like I think that that's like a very specific California thing, and that it's like people who grew up a little bit differently and not in some of these like kind of like immigrant enclave type of things. People like third, fourth generation, and you come across them and they like certainly exist and have been here for a long time, but like sometimes it's hard for people who grew up in these more cloistered immigrant communities to even meet those types of people until you go to college, right?
For sure.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about zines? I want to talk about zines.
Sure.
So the last few times I've seen Hua, he's like handed me a zine, and it's so sweet.
It's really great.
I have 9 more today. That's one. So.
And I'm really curious about it.
Know what a zine is?
Right. And so like the thing that I kind of like the thing that went through my head, even just now when you handed me one, like right before we came on here, I was like, oh, this is like who this person is. Like this is like so exciting for you, to like make these things, not to give them to me, obviously, but to give them to people, you know? And then on this book tour, like every single event that you have is like accompanied with some sort of zine swap or something like that, right? So like, like, I don't know, for the younger people in the crowd, first of all, maybe like explain what a zine is, and then like, you know, tell them like, you know, and why is this like an important thing for you? I don't mean this I feel like, you know.
What is a
sort of
zine,
like
Hua?
it's like a physical podcast, I guess. No, it's like a, you know,
Actually,
it's just like
that's good, yeah.
It's like a magazine that you make for yourself. Yeah, that's pretty much it. But I don't know. Did you ever go through a phase where you would do anything like that?
Yeah,
like
a little
zines,
bit.
chapbooks?
Yeah.
What was yours about?
Definitely. They would
What was
be
yours
like,
called?
I didn't have a name like that, like yours. Yeah, they were like little drawings, and yeah. They were mostly sad. They were just like weepy things I made in my 20s and 30s.
Would it make you feel less sad to make them, or would it amplify the sadness?
I think it depends on the breakup. You were making music zines and all kinds of
I was very into getting free CDs, which were these round objects that used to contain music. But yeah, I think I honestly, I think I read an article about zines in a magazine, like in a proper magazine. I'm like, oh, I should do that because I will never like work for the magazine. So it was just a way to have, I don't know, it was just like a way to have a platform, which sounds ridiculous now because like there's 500 potential, like every one of us has the power to broadcast ourselves into the world. But, you know, at the time, I think it was really exciting to be able to, you know, get primitive PageMaker software, like cut and paste something and then make like 15 copies of it.
Did you go to Kinko's? Where did you do your copying?
Kinko's was more, that was like the fancy copy shop. So I don't know, there was like Copy Central was the one I would go to in Berkeley.
Just an independent.
Or I would just like, when my dad was home from Taiwan, I would make him take me to his work so I could copy it there.
That's the best,
Oh, that's so cute. Yeah.
No, it was not very rebellious because my parents would drive me to the copy shop to make my zine. But I don't know, like, I think though, even at the time, because the internet was like, it existed, but nobody took it seriously. I think the idea of just having something that you could broadcast in a very limited way was very appealing. Like there's no illusion that this would become a big deal at all. Like there were stories of people who wrote zines and then like were allowed to make an indie film or something, but it really wasn't the road to any real attention. It was just kind of like, I am doing this for myself, and if these 10 people, for some reason I had a high concentration of readers in Halifax, Nova Scotia, which in my mind still remains like one of the coolest places on earth because
Have you been?
No, I've never been.
Oh, man,
like I think it would destroy it in
But
my
now
mind,
I'm thinking, like,
know?
you had 15 copies, so how many went to Halifax?
Like three.
Like three, right? Yeah.
And so in my mind, I was like, God, like someday I'm gonna go to college. Maybe it'll be in Halifax, Nova Scotia. But it was just, you know, I think there was something even at the time about just entering into these conversations that you knew were out there.
Yeah.
But they were very small. And as I get older, I'm like, that's really great, actually, to have these conversations that are like in public, but also like very private at the same time. Because there just aren't really, I don't know, things just aren't as walled off now. You know, everything is just sort of potentially something viral waiting to happen. So I don't know. It was just a very my zines were terrible, but they were very important in terms of just having just, you know, challenging yourself to make something. And I think writing the book reminded me of how much I like making things, which is why I keep making these random zines now. So
Right.
even though the internet exists, which would seem to make all of that stuff seem like kind of quaint and idiotic. So
Yeah, it's nice. I made some in high school too, because like where I grew up in Chapel Hill is like one of the epicenters of zines, you know, and like people would.
Oh yeah. Cool.
Yeah, because like there's a whole indie rock scene there
Oh,
with
okay.
Superchunk and Archers of Loaf, and then there was the Anarchist bookstore, and they had like a shelf where if you made a zine, you could put
You
it
just
on.
put it up there. Yeah. That's
So
cool.
me and my friends thought about making one, and then we couldn't figure, like what were we rebelling against? We're like rebelling against like the people on the yearbook staff, like like let me tell you, fuck them, like they're really bad, and like
Wait, so what was your college one then?
It was basically that.
Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't.
But
it
it was
wasn't
about the
anymore.
college.
The college edition
Yeah,
of the yearbook.
it was really just that, and then,
Right.
but it was, it wasn't much different than that. It was the same thing, but it was nice because it did feel very, like we would hope that like 80 people would read it, and that that they would like it so much that they would foster some sort of relationship, and then. And then you would be friends with those 80 people because they liked your zine, and hopefully they gave you something back. But yeah, I don't know. I try and
Kinda
find
like
like
the Discord.
huh?
It's like the Discord.
Yeah, right, exactly. I try and find
community.
modern
That's true.
analogs to it, and I guess it's all just like podcasts or something like that. And then I feel embarrassed that is my example because it feels like self-serving in some sort of way. But and then but maybe in terms of like the DIY part of it or something like that, and the idea that it's a community, maybe that's similar, but it's still not the same because it's not tactile. It's like digital. It's not something that you can like hand to somebody. I don't know. I found that part to be true.
I remember writing a whole article about how I hated braided belts. So
Yeah, they're
that
worse.
was like the substance.
They're the
of my
worst.
Just like fuck braided belts. Anyone who would wear one.
Do you still
Yeah,
hate them?
that was like
I was
basically my
shopping for one
content
today, and
too.
I'm like,
Oh,
I'm
you were
such a
shopping for
hypocrite.
one today.
I'm like, they're actually incredibly practical. So you don't need sizing.
I know. If you go out to dinner, you get a little full.
Yeah.
You must have read like my piece about vineyard vines. I'd be like, like, who wears this? What's up with these people? It's a great article. I don't know. Like, do you like one of the other things? Like this. I wanted to ask you is just like what you said at the beginning. Like, sort of struck me, which was that like you felt like this book would only be relatable to a small selection of people, right? And then, but you went ahead and you did it anyway, right? I don't know. How did that sort of like? Did you have thoughts throughout that process where you're just like who is gonna, like how do I make the people who are not the people who are this is intended for? Like like you have this like push and pull. I don't even think about this morning. I like talked to this high school in Manhattan, and that's one of the questions the kids ask me. So I'm asking you, relaying
Do you
you
think
the.
about audience?
I'm relaying you the question of a 15-year-old, But like as I was like fumbling to answer it, I was like, well, like you sort of do this push and pull in your head, where you're just like, sometimes you think about it, and then sometimes you feel very hostile towards the audience, and then you come back, and then you feel hostile towards the audience again, and you're just like, do not interrupt me. And then you're like, but listen, I need you, like, and then you're like, but do not interrupt my process. This is what goes through my head every single day. But like, like for you, like, because this is like a specific thing, right? And that like, like it is a type, like the Asian American Berkeley 90s person is a type, right? Like, how did you, I know so many of them, how did you sort of go through that process?
I don't know. I didn't really think about it because I think when you're writing, if you're writing for a magazine or a newspaper, you know what your editor is going to think. Like you have your editor's voice, and you kind of know what they like and what they don't like, or just sort of what the house style is. Mm-hmm. But I guess with this, it's why it took so long. Like, I started writing stuff in 1998, and it did take a while to take shape because I think there is no, I don't know, like there are no model. Like I'm very good at copying other people's work, like structurally.
Yeah.
Like if I have to write a profile, I'll just read a bunch of other people's profiles
sure,
and say like, oh, like this is what 1,000 words in you do this. Like, but with this, I don't read a ton of memoirs, and there weren't like a ton of like Asian American memoirs when I was in high school or college,
right.
And so it was sort of hard for me to figure out like how to write from the perspective that like people don't care about. And by people, I mean like white readers, because that's like what the publishing industry is. Like,
Right.
I was sort of like, there's no real natural audience for this because it's a story of like two Asian American people trying to figure out random stuff, and then I just didn't think it was something with any kind of broader context that people would grasp onto, which is like a concern that's threaded into the book too.
Right.
But yeah, so I just figured that it was something that I had to write just to figure stuff out for myself. Like that was the only real goal in the beginning, was just like, I have these hundreds of pages of journal entries. Like, why do I keep doing this? Like, what am I trying to reconstruct by writing about the past so much? And so there's like a version of the book that's twice as long, and it's probably more of a representation of like how I actually think and feel, but it's like very messy and there's no narrative, and it's like probably completely unrelatable. There's like random riffs about things that happen like in the future and things like that.
I see.
And so when I took all of that out, I'm like, oh, it's just a story of these two friends.
Yeah.
And maybe that's something that people will be interested in. But I don't know, I just didn't really think about it that much. Like after I finished it, I sent it to some people who were actually in the book, and they didn't really have any strong opinions other than like, I remember that moment, or like, you captured this moment very well. But like, I had no idea if any of the quote unquote ideas in the book had any kind of, would have any purchase beyond that. And I just didn't really think about it, which sounds like kind of dumb and cavalier, but I honestly just had no sense of how anyone would relate to it. So I just figured there's no obvious way to shoehorn it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Like there's no, like I remember when I was a kid, and my parents were like they're pretty laid back about a lot of things. And at recess, we would all complain about our parents. People would say like, oh, like my dad was like, made me do all this stuff. And I was like, wow, yeah, same with mine. Even though my dad didn't make me do those things, like I was just trying to kind of conform to this like trope that we were developing together.
Yeah.
And because those
Like
tropes,
Amy Chua, peer pressure.
yeah, I was like, yes, like I am like that, even though just to fit in. But I think when I was writing it, I just figured there's no way. It's unclear to me whether anyone outside of like an Asian American audience, and particularly like a very West Coast Asian American audience, will ever actually like understand any of this. So there's no way to make it like obvious. Is this making any sense? I feel like I just keep turning back and forth, like trying to be like,
What do you want me to
Looking
do?
for affirmation. Like,
Do you want me to nod? Like,
yeah,
you know,
exactly.
yeah.
I guess what I'm hearing from you is you felt this compulsion, like you have to do it. And then,
I had to do it because I was just doing it anyways.
yeah, you were doing it anyways. But so once you started moving it though through the kind of machinery of cultural production, like your agent and the editor and the houses, what happened to it? Was it shrinking? Was it
It shrank, yeah.
Dude, were you okay with that?
Yeah, because I think ultimately it's a very meaningful part of my life, obviously, but it didn't need to be like a 400-page book.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Like I just felt like, to be honest about sort of the span of a life and sort of like how things happen, like it kind of made sense for it to be a shorter book. And so I don't know, like the editorial process was actually like pretty easy in that regard.
It's good. I'm laughing because I was thinking that, yeah, you shrunk it, but you have like 17 times where you say how much you hate Pearl Jam. They did not edit those out.
It's very overblown at this point, but yes.
Yeah, it was.
It used to be 34 times, so, you know. Pearl Jam's okay, yeah.
That isn't the imitation part is
Do you guys
interesting
like
to
Pearl
me.
Jam?
Yeah.
No,
You
Yeah.
do?
but
Like,
I don't
like
have any.
all of it, or just 10?
A lot of it.
I don't really have any strong feelings about it. You know, they're fine. I'm like happy that they like have found their inner peace. You know.
Yeah, totally.
Like
yeah.
I like think
Why
about
is that?
them as like a model for life in terms of like.
I do too
like,
now.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because they're like, fuck Ticketmaster. Like, we're not corporate anymore.
Yeah.
We're going to make these albums. I haven't heard a song that they've put out since like Vitalogy or something. But I respect
The study of life.
I respect that that like work exists and that they feel like it's for them and the people who appreciate them. That's cool, you know? It's like if you I don't know. They're like making a zine or something, you know. It's like,
I agree. That's where I've landed.
Every album since the 90s was a zine.
Yeah.
yeah.
But, like, are you like their entire catalog? You've had like engagement with?
No.
Okay.
I mean, but you know, I felt like it was a lot. You were really,
I know.
You were really going after
and
them.
actually, ever since, because I get this question a lot.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I've tried. I still don't get them at all.
None of it.
But now I'm like, there's 3 or 4 songs that I actually like.
Okay.
Which one?
And
Yeah,
I don't know. They're the obvious ones.
Like that one about the old lady in a town or something.
No, I don't know that song.
Yellow Ledbetter.
Yellow Ledbetter, because
Yeah.
it's in the book. Black, because it was my junior prom theme, which is
Aw.
like very weird
Yeah,
if you think
actually,
about
that
it.
is
It's a little
weird.
yeah.
It was supposed to be Today by Smashing Pumpkins.
Okay.
Which is actually
Which would-
a worse choice
I guess
because it's
I'm not sure.
it's not a very uplifting
Yeah,
song.
I feel like this is a very depressing prom.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I was in Seattle on book tour, and everywhere I went,
Oh,
someone
wow.
was playing Better Man, the Pearl Jam song, and I'm like, you know
Everywhere
what?
you went.
Yeah, this
Wow.
is from the like Asian-owned psychedelics shop to the airport to the rest, like everywhere it was like
So
Better
bizarre.
Man. So
Huh.
yeah, they have some cool songs.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
But I read that the day after Kurt Cobain took his own life, Pearl Jam and Mudhoney, which is another great Seattle band, they were at the White House on a tour.
Okay.
Yeah. They just happened to be in D.C. on tour, and I guess Bill Clinton had invited Pearl Jam to the White House as a
Wow.
tour. Yeah. And so Mudhoney were just like
That is
high,
so
hanging
weird.
out. They're like very cool people. And Bill Clinton like takes Eddie Vedder aside and is like, "Do I need to address the nation on what happened to Kurt Cobain?" And I'm just like, that's like
amazing.
a wild story because that's a lot of pressure to put on Eddie Vedder.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, do you think I need to address the nation on what happened with Kurt Cobain?
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's kind of incredible. And
What did he say?
I don't know what he said. I'm sure he felt like very pained and replied in that sort of like baritone, kind of foghorn-esque voice of his. But no, so yeah, my views on them have softened.
Yeah,
considerably.
wow.
They seem like incredibly decent people. And the older I get, I'm like, I think that's all that really matters.
I know, that's
You know?
how I am these days,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm just like, are you a good hang or not?
Yeah.
Like, and I imagine myself hanging out, and then I'm just like, it's probably okay, you know. Hey, who cares? It's politics. Like, it's fine.
Yeah, they're right about Ticketmaster.
Yeah, they were right about
That's right,
Ticketmaster.
yeah.
They're probably right about Naps. Oh, wait, no, that was Metallica.
That was Metallica. They were.
They're not a good hang, I don't think. Yeah. Like, probably like the worst. Although Kurt seems cool. Yeah, we were talking about
Kirk
this
Hammett, the
backstage.
Asian American Metallica.
Yeah, the original James Eha, I guess, right? Yeah, what you were talking about imitation, I actually think is actually quite interesting. I feel that way too, you know. And then sometimes I've thought, you know, like, have you read like that Ishiguro book, like, you know, like where The Floating Life, and it's about like
love that book.
ukiyo-e, and it's about like how, and like, you know, when I read it, I was like, I read it when I was pretty young, and I remember having this very like internally racist thought, I'd be like, maybe Asians are very good at copying things. You know, I sometimes worry about that because I feel, writing-wise, like I was like, well, I could probably like imitate a lot of different things, and then sometimes I feel like my writing style is just like this, like whatever, like blend of imitations that I'm doing at the same time. I don't know. I thought it was interesting that you felt that way too. Like, there's no like people are like, what is your voice? And I'm like, well, I don't know. Like, you know,
Right.
it's just like a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of this, and it's all mixed together, and then the sentence is like go in like a line, you know, and that's it. But there's no expression of like my soul in there, you know, that I can feel. It's just like, this is a good sentence and this is a good sentence. It's mostly imitative, you know, and so I never like understand the voice question, you know. Do you understand it? Like, you know, like I don't know. Like, I think of you as a writer who has like pretty distinct voice, but like do you feel that? Like,
You, not me.
No,
Yeah, I'm talking to
I don't
you.
at all. No.
Yeah.
I don't feel like
Really? I
Yeah.
think both of you guys, I know your voice and your work.
yeah, but it's not like
Do you
a
agree
real
that
thing.
Asians are good mimics?
Do you feel like
Apparently you are.
K-pop is just like is an amazing invitation? I don't know. Because I try and think about it very intellectually or like whatever, you know, or like I try and like parse it down and I'm just like, no, that's just like I read some Dennis Johnson essay about when he was doing like psychedelics in the desert. And I'm just writing it like that, you know? And then like here, I felt like this would be cool if I like did this Lydia Davis essay about how she likes this dictionary better than her child. And I'm just like putting that in there, you know? And then so it just feels kind of like fraudulent to me at some point. But like, you know, I don't know. I don't know why I'm admitting all of this. But like, I thought that like you talk, like, is that how you also think about writing? Or like that's how you think of your own writing? Yeah, okay.
But it's not like Dennis Johnson wasn't imitating someone else.
Right.
You know, you gotta
well, I
decolonize
just
your
assume
mind, man.
everyone is like that. No, I assume everybody was like that, you know? Like everybody was, like Dennis Johnson was like kind of copying Donald Bartlemy or something like that, right? And that like Donald Bartlemy was like, I don't know, like, you know, there was somebody that he was inspired by, maybe Burroughs or something like that. And yeah, I don't know. I've never understood the voice thing. Yeah. That's another question a 15-year-old asked me today.
Like, do you have a voice?
Yeah, very precocious 15-year-olds, yeah. But that was like, how do you develop a voice?
Were you thinking about that, Hua, when you were writing? Well, at least maybe not if voice is the weird word, but the tone of the book. How you wanted it to feel. What kind of vibe you wanted it to give off, I guess.
Yeah, no, I was. And I mean, you know who I feel like I've copied a lot from? So like, I didn't read a ton of memoirs, but there's these certain like feelings I wanted to approach. And I've said this in the past, but like, they weren't necessarily literary or like nonfiction, but I think when I started writing it, you know, I was 21 and the intensity of, you just feel things more intensely when you're younger.
Course,
like now I'm just so beaten down. I just cannot feel anything that high or that low anymore.
Yeah.
But I think that, and obviously like the scale of what happened with Ken was something that I think most of us who were there at that time like have still not experienced something that kind of sudden and tragic.
Sure, yeah.
But I was just sort of fixated on how sad and shitty I felt and how everyone around me felt. And it took me a while to realize that I think part of what matters coming out of something like that is just what you take out of the memory, or just sort of how you try and honor a person's memory by not necessarily just staying in that low key, you know, so, or that minor key. So I think that there's just a kind of joy or a kind of utopian vision in like Pharoah Sanders' music, but it's also kind of melancholy and chaotic. Sure. And just sort of having both things at once is something that I try to do in the voice. I don't think that was like my voice necessarily, is that like, oh, you could be happy and sad at the same time, but it was something that I tried to build into the book. Yeah. And so I think the person I copy the most is Maxine Hong Kingston, because she writes these like incredibly long-winded lyrical things that are actually quite sad, but they're also she's like such a hippie. Yeah. You know, and I feel like sometimes when I'm writing, because the book I think is sad, but it's also, there are moments of, I hope, humor and joy and sort of like yearning. And I think those were things where I was like, I want this to feel like what some of Maxine's books feel like, which is that.
That's great.
Like, yeah, like there's war, but there's also this community of friends who stayed up all night at a party and like, we'll come up with the solution. Yeah. Which is like so naive, but also so sweet and beautiful. Yeah. And she just completely copied Walt Whitman, you know. Like, right. So there's like, and her voice is like derivative of the things she loves, but I think that's fine, you know.
Yeah. And you wrote a great profile of her in the New Yorker. She seems like a cool hang, also.
Yeah, she's a great hang.
It was a beautiful piece. Yeah.
What was the process like? I'm sorry for so many writer questions, but like, you know, you're taking stuff you wrote when you were 21, which is like 20 years ago or more, right? And trying to make them, you know, like to try and present them in a book, you know, because if I found stuff I had written back then, it would be, you gotta be like, well, some of this is like just objectively bad, you know, and that like I don't know how to redo this, but I also kind of don't. I want to somehow capture the energy that I had when I wrote it, you know. Like, so how did you go through that? Because I think it's, you know, I felt very emotional while reading it, you know, and so I think it worked, right? Like at least it did for me, and I don't think it had anything to do with like, you know, our friendship or anything. I just felt like I felt like it was there. Like how did you sort of do that? How do you take stuff that's like 20 years old and then like try and put it in a book that is like, you know, from you today? Or is it from you today even?
I guess I just took the stuff that I thought sounded good still. Like
Yeah.
a lot of it was bad,
Right.
but I think what I consulted was more like I was just very fastidious about taking notes back then. And so a lot of it is stuff that is probably rewritten through today's language, but it's just sort of like, this is what we ate that day, or this is how many people were in the van that day. There are moments in the book where I quote my journal from when I was 22, but I sort of point out that even then I was like, this is actually like terrible writing, you
Right.
know?
Right.
Or just, you know, I think even then I was worried about like, is this just me trying to sound deep? And that's something that I wrote when I was 23. And so, yeah, I don't know, like it's all very cringe, like reading stuff from when you're 21 or 22.
I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone. There are very few people for whom that would not be like an excruciating experience, right? But I don't know. Like, there's also just something so direct about what I was trying to express in those
Yeah.
moments. And in the longer version, there's like way more of it, and so it's
I see.
probably for the best that it's not there. But so much of the book is also about me trying to recapture the feeling I had when I had to like deliver the eulogy, and I thought like this is like perfect. Not that this is like, not that these are great sentences or anything like that, but this is just exactly how a bunch of my friends and I feel in this
Yeah.
moment, because we kind of collectively authored this document.
Wow.
And so trying to recapture that feeling forced me to just kind of go back and reread stuff and
Yeah.
yeah. So
What has Ken's family said about the book?
Ken's mother has read it, and yeah, I mean, her comments are very general. She said, "You're a good friend," but and that it was very hard to read.
Yeah.
Like, it was clearly
I'm
very
sure.
hard for a lot of people to read in our friend group, like other friends of Ken's as well. But yeah, I gave her a copy early on, and
Yeah.
yeah, she said it took her quite a while to read it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, Tammy, is there?
Well, I wanted to
Yeah,
ask
we have
you.
some questions
Yeah,
from the
we had
audience.
some questions from our Discord subscriber group. While you're on the spot now. Okay, so one of them is about the woman in your book. It's mostly, as we were saying, about male friendships and the father-son relationship, but you talk a little bit about dating and sex. And the question is, do you think the women you write about in your book remember you and your interactions in the same way?
I know the answer, at least for like
Oh,
two
yeah?
of these people.
Okay,
Yeah.
because you're still in touch?
I'm still friends with like
Okay.
95% of the people. In the
Oh,
book.
wow. Amazing. Okay.
So I think that I think you always understand your own insecurities more than other people's, obviously. And so I think that my level of actual like insecurity or lack of confidence was not obvious to other people. And so, yeah, one person was like, I didn't think of you as lacking I didn't think of you as lacking in confidence the way you did.
Oh, funny.
And I actually felt that way. And I was like, I could see that
What a mean thing to say.
No, I didn't. No, not like that. I just mean like
No,
I
what,
understand.
like
that,
what then? You're like, yeah, well, you're like, by the way, I'm glad you said that about me, but I totally know what you're talking about.
No, just that.
Everyone at that age, though, is like.
Yeah,
feeling
just
that
that
way.
I don't. Honestly, like the whole collector thing has me thinking, like whether I'm like a complete alien here or not, but or like how normal my reaction to things are. One person did not think that they were as sort of like otherworldly as I depicted them. Someone that I'm still very good friends with. But yeah, I sent those people. I sent anyone who was in the book for more than like 2 sentences, the book, their sections
That's
in advance.
nice, yeah.
And
That's
so,
super nice. Yeah. I didn't do that.
That's a good move, I think.
yeah.
Because did you have it fact checked, or did you just?
No,
Okay,
no, but
so
you know, like someone was like,
Yeah.
I don't know why you thought I was so hot or something like that. I'm like,
Oh.
well, like, I think you were incorrect in this. But it was sort of like, but it's also just sort of supposed to be from the perspective of someone who's like 20
Yeah.
and in their first, or like one of their first relationships. And so,
Definitely.
yeah, that kind of, is this making any sense?
Yeah. I feel like you kind of took the easy way out, but I'm good with it.
Well, I don't know what
I
what's
don't
What's the
know.
hard
I
way
don't
out?
know.
What's he
Yeah.
supposed
I
to
don't
say,
know.
you
I don't know. Like the juicier stuff, like the dating stuff, the sex stuff. I don't know. Were there reactions to your depictions of the romance? In
My
them?
friends, my friend's daughter picked up the book and turned straight to the page where I lose my virginity and was like, ew, and then just and shut the book.
That's great.
Yeah, and I was like, that's fine. You'll understand someday.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know, like, it's weird because all writing requires you to become a character, like whether you're writing the first person or
Definitely,
not.
yeah.
And in this case, I definitely have turned myself into a character, like there's
Of course,
obviously,
yeah.
as one of my friends was like, you're not actually this funny in real life, or this quick. But yeah, I think particularly with those relationships, it may not come across, but I think part of why the character, i.e. me, is like so kind of seems clueless but is like very head over heels is because like these were like very special people to me.
Yeah.
Right? But then I don't think they understood necessarily, and I was special to them too, but I've also been thinking about these moments in my life for like 20 years.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so I think obviously everyone in the book, not just the women, but also like my roommate and other friends, they think about that period of time, but they're like, I can't believe how much you've thought about this.
I see.
And how much reading this feels like we're just hanging out back then still. And so I think for, for the women in the book, there is a sense of like, wow, I didn't know you thought this deeply about these things because you seemed so like cool about certain things.
Right.
You seemed like checked out about certain things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not meant to be like the likable person in those moments, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
What did you like? How much did you think about the putting photos in the book? Because like the cover is somebody with a camera, right, and there are photos in there, and
Yeah, it's Ken with a camera.
right,
Yeah.
right. What is the like? What was like? Did you think about it? Were you like? Was there a part of you that? Did you always want to put those photos in the book? Like, did you? Or was there a part where you're just like, oh, well, that'll like disrupt the imagination of the reader? Or you're like, oh, I want to have interruptions at this point. I want to put the photo here. Like, like what was the process for that? Because it's like super interesting to me, at least. Like, you don't have to like make some sort of like Sebaldian like argument about it, But like, what was
That was the inspiration.
Yeah, well, that's what I assumed, right? Like, because like I was like thinking about when you were talking about like all the random Asian photos of Asian people, like you could have done that, like if it was a slightly different book or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
It was my editor's idea because I didn't know we had a budget to put images.
Okay.
But yeah, part of the reason they're there is to break up the book. Like there aren't chapter headings or chapter numbers.
Right.
It is there to break up the text, but they're also not explained, the photos necessarily, and so it's kind of meant to just, remind you, like give you a glimpse into this world, but it's more like you're just walking down the hall of a dorm and you just like peek into people's rooms, and you know that there's a life there, but that you may not access it. So yeah, it's sort of. It also is sort of zany too.
Yeah,
Like,
that
it's just
was
like
the other
in
thing I thought.
text,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, we have another question. What from the audience? What's one song that came out after Ken's death that you wish he could hear?
Wow, that's an incredible question.
I know it's really beautiful. Yeah.
This is like a.
Sorry, it's such a hard question to fit on you.
Wow, that's a really good question. Like a lot. Wow, that is that's an incredible question.
We can let you think about it, but
No,
yeah,
that's seriously
it's so
an
sweet.
unbelievable question because that is the precise thing that I would write in my journal.
Right.
Like I remember
I see, yeah.
the week after it happened, like a bunch of us went to go see There's Something About Mary.
Oh yeah.
The
that
comedy.
seems like so long. Well, it was a
But
long
like I
time.
remember because he and I had gone to see a movie, and when the trailer came on, he's like, "Let's go see that." And so then when I saw it, I went home and I'm like, "Dude, you would have died when this one scene with Brett Favre, like, and I can hear you say Brett Favre, So like that is the type of exact type of thing that I would keep track of. Like this is like my friend Dave. Like you would have liked this dude, It sounds like incredibly cheesy, but it's partly because I've been listening to the song a lot. But that Foo Fighters song, My Hero, I feel like I could totally imagine. It's also just sort of like a weirdly good song.
Is it?
It's a great song, yeah. I think Foo Fighters, like Pearl Jam, is like not an albums group, but they have like 2 really good songs. But for whatever reason, they're like wildly successful just off having like 2 or 3 really good songs, much like Pearl Jam. But which is probably why I'm gonna say like a Foo Fighters song. But
I see.
but there's just so many. I mean, I can't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a sweet way to remember someone, though. Just kind of walking around, experiencing your life, and thinking like, "Oh, I know they would really like this thing."
Yeah, because we do that anyways.
Right.
With normal people.
With the living, yeah.
with our friends, and I think that I don't know. I think the thing that I think about a lot is just how. Because the book isn't necessarily meant to be an example of. It's not like the book is about like me being this like dope friend, because in reality I think I was just like a very, I was just like a self-absorbed teenager.
Sure.
And part of why Ken and I became friends is because he was actually open-minded and actually like a good person. And so I think more about things that we do in our daily lives now out of friendship that I would have enjoyed doing with him, like just texting to see how someone's doing, or just emailing after like some big dumb sports thing happens, just stuff like that. Just the kind of daily maintenance check-in of friendship. Those are things that I sort of, and part of it is saying like, oh, check out this song, or I thought of you when this came on. So
Yeah.
That's
That's cool. Well, props to the asker, I guess.
those are both incredible questions. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you a lot for the
Aren't
book.
you guys going to do like normal podcast stuff? Like talk about
China?
what you've been up to, like labor.
We
you
feel
know?
so
we should've
exposed
talked
just sitting here.
about
Like,
Well, we have a confined amount of time, and also like nothing. I don't know. I was like tired, and then I was like, most of our banter is me asking Tammy where she is, which is a little bit more obvious.
How was your
Also,
trip?
like somebody said they didn't like it, and it got stuck in my head.
Someone
Oh,
didn't
really?
like the band.
Yeah.
They didn't like the banter.
Yeah, and then I was
okay.
like, and since then I've been consciously trying to cut it down.
Really?
Like they would skip past the banter.
Yeah,
just to
because
get-
I
Actually,
thought
yeah.
about it because I was
we
like,
have had that request.
I thought about it because like a
For
lot of
timestamps.
podcasts I just
I saw
fast
some
forward.
heads nodding there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
May the other day was like, we need to put in timestamps because some people want to
Yeah.
skip over the
I
banter.
know. Well, like there is a podcast I was listening to that uses Pearl Jam as like as the part where you can skip forward all the ads and then once Pearl Jam starts, that's when the podcast starts, and so you fast forward till you hear Pearl Jam.
are we talking about Simmons?
Yeah. So we need to put something in that's licensable, that
I
we
see.
can people could skip over the band. So we didn't do it this time because we've had
Next,
some
our
requests.
friends Pearl
That's
Jam.
really funny.
Yeah.
Well, thank you
No,
so
thanks
much.
for having me.
Congratulations on the book. And
No, thanks for everyone for being here.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Yeah, we're gonna be in the back signing books for the next half hour or so, and there's books to buy and refreshments in the back, and you can hang out for a bit.
Thank you to the APA Institute.
Thank you so much, the AP Institute. Thank you guys so much for coming.
Quando sei lontana sogno all'orizzonte e manca le parole e io sì lo so che sei con me.